This happened about 4 years ago during spring break, and at the time it felt like exactly what we needed. My girlfriend Anna wanted something quiet, something isolated, just a few days away from everything. She had been talking about a cabin trip for months, somewhere deep in the woods where no one would bother us. Her brother Hunter was staying with us during his break anyway, so he came along too. I found a cabin online that seemed almost too perfect, tucked far into the woods and strangely cheap for what it offered. I remember noticing that for a second, thinking it was odd, and then just letting it go. When we arrived Friday evening, the isolation hit immediately. You couldn't even see the road from the porch, just endless trees in every direction. At the time, that felt peaceful. Off to the side of the property, there was a large shed with a heavy padlock on it. Hunter messed with it briefly and said it looked brand new, like it had been replaced recently. I brushed it off, saying it was probably just storage. It was getting dark fast, so we went inside and focused on dinner. That first night felt normal. We had a couple of drinks on the porch, listened to the rain as it started falling, and eventually went to bed. The woods were louder than I expected, filled with insects, frogs, and distant movement, but it was oddly calming. At some point before falling asleep, though, I heard something heavier moving out there, something bigger than the usual sounds. I convinced myself it was just a deer and drifted off. What woke me up later was a loud thump against the side of the cabin. It snapped me awake instantly. I stayed still, trying to convince myself it was part of a dream, until it happened again, the exact same sound, solid and deliberate. I looked over at Anna, but she was still asleep. That meant I had to check. I didn't want to, not even a little, but if something was out there, I needed to know. I grabbed a flashlight and moved carefully toward the window, refusing to step outside. The rain had soaked the ground, and that's when I saw them, footprints. Clear, fresh footprints leading toward the locked shed. They weren't ours. None of us had been outside since the rain started. For a moment, I tried to convince myself Hunter had gone out there earlier, but deep down I knew he hadn't. The shape didn't look like an animal either. It looked human. I felt this sudden wave of dread wash over me, something instinctive telling me to stay inside. I locked everything again, checked every door, and went back to bed, though sleep didn't come easily. A few hours later, I woke up again, but this time it was worse. Someone was knocking on the front door. Slow, steady, intentional knocks echoing through the cabin. My heart started pounding immediately. It had to be around 4 a.m., and there was no logical reason anyone should be out there, not in a place that remote. The knocking woke Anna, and I could see pure fear on her face. I forced myself out of bed and walked to the door. Before I could say anything, a man's voice came from the other side. He said he was a forest ranger and that there had been an incident nearby, that he needed to check on us. Everything about it felt wrong. The timing, the tone, the fact that he already knew someone was inside. I told him we were fine and didn't need any help, hoping that would be enough to make him leave. For a few seconds, there was silence. Then he spoke again, saying he needed to ask us some questions. That's when the fear turned into certainty. He wasn't a ranger. Hunter had come up behind me at that point, and I whispered for him to call the police while I kept the man talking. I tried to stay calm, giving vague answers, pretending I wasn't suspicious. After a moment, Hunter leaned in and whispered that the police said no rangers had been sent out. Hearing that confirmed everything. My chest tightened and I could feel panic building. It was the middle of nowhere, and someone was outside pretending to be law enforcement. Then his tone changed. He started banging harder, his voice louder, more aggressive. He demanded I open the door, threatened to break it down, even said I'd be arrested if I didn't comply. Anna shouted at him to leave, and that seemed to push him over the edge. He started kicking the door hard enough to shake the frame, then suddenly the noise moved around the cabin. He was circling us. I told Anna to lock herself in the bathroom while Hunter and I grabbed knives from the kitchen. Every sound felt amplified, every movement outside like he was testing the house, looking for a way in. Then, without warning, one of the windows exploded. Glass shattered across the room as a rock came flying through. I froze, expecting him to climb in right after it, but he didn't. That moment stretched longer than anything I've ever experienced, just standing there, staring at the broken window, waiting. Then finally, faint at first but getting louder, we heard sirens. The moment they got close, everything outside went silent. The police arrived quickly, searched the property, but somehow couldn't find him. It didn't make sense. He had been right there seconds before. Hunter was furious, yelling at them, insisting the guy had nowhere to go, but the officers just told us to pack up and leave. That was it, no answers. No explanation. As we drove away, the adrenaline started to fade and the reality of what had happened settled in. Someone knew about that cabin. Someone came out there in the middle of the night, pretending to be a ranger, trying to get us to open the door. And the worst part is, we never found out why. This happened back in 2016 when I was a senior in college, and at the time it felt like just another wild spring break story waiting to happen. Nothing more than a week of chaos and bad decisions. I was in a frat TKE, and one of the traditions was traveling with your brothers and whatever sorority groups you were connected with. Usually 30 or 40 people, all packed into the same place for an entire week. It wasn't exactly responsible, but it was fun, and that year the destination was Acapulco. Within weeks, everything was booked, and suddenly we were all on the Pacific coast, drinking, partying, and doing exactly what you'd expect a group of college kids to do when no one's watching. But the story isn't really about me, it's about my friend Sahil. He was the kind of guy who could turn any situation into something louder, riskier, and way more complicated than it needed to be. I say that with respect because he was genuinely a good person, but he had zero sense of self-preservation and absolutely no impulse control, which was a dangerous combination in a place like that. A few days into the trip, a group of us went out to a local club. Everything was normal at first, crowded dance floor, loud music, drinks flowing, until Sahil started doing what he always did, scanning the room for something stronger than what he already had. It was a terrible idea, especially in a foreign city known for things you don't want to get involved in, and none of us spoke Spanish, which made it worse. We told him to drop it multiple times, and he said he would, but I knew him well enough to know that meant nothing. We kept an eye on him for a while, but the club was massive, and eventually he disappeared into the crowd like he always did. At first, no one thought much of it, but as time passed, it started to feel wrong. His phone went straight to voicemail, which didn't make sense because Sahil was the type of person who always kept things organized. His phone dying like that wasn't normal. The energy shifted fast. One moment we were partying, the next we were searching, texting, calling, trying to figure out where he went. Eventually, we decided to leave, hoping he had already gone back to the resort. Outside, the streets were chaotic, people everywhere trying to get rides, so we walked a little distance away to call a driver. It was around 1 a.m., dark, loud, and chaotic, and that's when we saw him. Sahil came stumbling toward us out of the darkness, and the second we got close, we knew something was seriously wrong. His shirt was torn, his face swollen, and he was limping badly. He looked like he had been through something violent. We got him into the car immediately and rushed back to the resort. At first, he didn't say much, just kept repeating that he'd explain later, but once we were inside, he finally told us what happened. He had found a guy near the bar, a short man who barely spoke English, with another guy translating for him. Something about the translator felt off to him, but not enough to stop him. The man showed him a sample, and Sahil tried it, and that was all it took. His judgment disappeared right there. The man told him they couldn't do business inside and convinced him to step outside. Sahil knew it was a bad idea, but he went anyway. The moment they got outside, everything changed. A car was waiting, and before he could process what was happening, they shoved him into the back seat and drove off. He said it felt like 15 or 20 minutes, but time didn't make sense anymore. The second the car started moving, they went through his pockets, taking everything, and when he resisted, they beat him. Hard. They destroyed his phone, took anything valuable, and left him with nothing. What saved him, strangely enough, was something he said without thinking. One of the men asked why there were so many Americans in the city, and Sahil told them about spring break, about how dozens of students from the same university were staying at the same resort. He didn't realize it at the time, but that information likely changed everything. The two men started arguing in Spanish, going back and forth, and eventually the car stopped. They dragged him out and threw him onto the road, just like that. He had no idea where he was, no phone, no direction, nothing. So he started walking, guessing which way to go, hoping he was heading in the right direction. Somehow, by pure luck, he was, and somehow he found us. Even now, I still think about how close that was to ending differently. If he hadn't mentioned the group, if he had gotten into that car 20 minutes earlier, if we hadn't been standing right there when he stumbled out of the dark. Things could have gone a completely different way. We thought about calling the police for maybe 3 seconds before deciding it was a terrible idea. No one else at the resort ever found out what happened, and to this day, most people still think it was just another wild night. But it was something else entirely. Something that could have ended in a way none of us would have been ready to deal with. I've kept this one to myself for years, mostly because even now I can't fully explain what happened, and the more I think about it, the less sense it makes. This was during spring break of my junior year, and I've always been the kind of person who notices things, sometimes too much. I overthink, I question everything, and most of the time it's exhausting, but that instinct might have been the only reason we got out of that place. My ex-girlfriend Anna had a friend named Lena, the type of person who always knew where the next party was, always connected, always in the loop. So when she told us about a lake house trip out in the Ozarks, it didn't sound strange at all. According to her, it was a big group, sorority girls, frat guys, a standard spring break setup. There were 4 of us going, me, Anna, Lena, and Lena's boyfriend Colby, who drove us since he had the biggest car. The drive was long but easy, everyone in a good mood, music playing, nothing out of the ordinary until we hit the final stretch, a winding road with almost no houses. Just trees closing in tighter the farther we went. When we pulled up to the house, it didn't match what Lena had described. It was massive, sitting right on the lake, with a wraparound deck and a dock stretching out into the water, the kind of place that felt too expensive, too hidden. Like it wasn't meant to be found easily. What really stood out, though, was the number of cars. Lena said maybe 20 people, but there were at least 25 cars, some parked along the road because there wasn't enough space. That was the first thing that didn't sit right. When we walked up, there was a guy by the door who introduced himself as the host, and everything about him felt off. His words were smooth, almost rehearsed, like he had said the same thing over and over again. He gave us the rundown, house rules, where to go, what to do, and then he mentioned the keys. He said the roads were dangerous at night, and that they were collecting everyone's car keys for safety. It sounded reasonable on the surface, but something about it felt controlled, like we were giving something up without realizing it. Colby handed over the keys, and I watched closely as the host dropped them into a bowl already filled with other keys, dozens of them. At least that meant everyone was in the same situation. Or so I thought. Inside, the house was packed, at least 30 people, maybe more, all drinking, talking, blending together. But the strange part was that Lena didn't recognize a single person. Not one. Everyone looked like they belonged there, like typical college kids, but no one knew anyone outside their own small group. It wasn't one big party, it was clusters of people who had all arrived separately like us. That detail stuck with me, but I tried to ignore it. The first night was fun. Drinks, games, music, everything you'd expect, but the host never relaxed. He didn't drink, didn't party, just moved through the rooms, occasionally stopping to write something down on a clipboard, actually writing like he was tracking something. That image stayed with me longer than it should have. The next morning, I woke up early and noticed the bowl of keys was gone. That was the second thing that felt wrong. Later that morning, I saw a couple leaving, packing their things, saying goodbye and driving off. I watched their car disappear down the road. It felt normal, people coming and going. But that night, sitting by the bonfire, I saw them again. The same couple, sitting across the fire like they had never left. I was certain of it. I told Anna, but she brushed it off, said I was imagining things. I couldn't prove it, so I let it go, but it stayed in my head. The next morning, I went for a walk, needing space, needing to prove to myself that I wasn't trapped in some kind of controlled environment. About a quarter mile down the road, I found an equipment shed, and behind it was their car, parked, hidden, exactly the same. That's when everything shifted. It wasn't paranoia anymore, it was real. I went back to the house and didn't tell anyone at first, just watched, observed, tried to understand what was happening. Later that day, I confronted the couple. Asked them directly if they had left the morning before. They acted confused, like I was insane, but I could see it in their faces. They were lying, and then I noticed something worse. People around us had gone quiet, not completely silent, but quieter, like they were listening, watching. It felt like the entire house was aware of that conversation. Anna pulled me away, and when I told her everything, she finally took me seriously. She admitted she had noticed strange things too, people with identical backstories, conversations that didn't add up. That's when we decided we needed to leave, but Colby and Lena didn't agree. They thought I was overreacting, that it was just a weird party, nothing more. We argued and eventually compromised to stay one more night. That decision felt like a mistake immediately. The next morning, when we went downstairs, every single person was looking at me. Not obviously, not all at once, but enough that I could feel it. Anna felt it too. That's when I knew we couldn't stay. I walked straight to the host and told him we were leaving. He smiled at first, asked what was wrong, tried to keep the conversation light, but when I insisted, something changed. His expression dropped, the smile disappeared. The room went quiet again, and I could feel every person watching. A girl nearby said, "That's not a good idea," in a way that didn't sound like advice, it sounded like a warning. The host finally agreed and told me to follow him. When Anna tried to come with me, he stopped her immediately, sharply, aggressively, like he didn't want anyone else seeing where we were going. He led me through the house to a room with everyone's keys hanging on hooks. Without asking, he picked out ours instantly, like he already knew exactly which ones were ours. When he handed them to me, he said, "You're making a mistake," and in that moment I realized something chilling. Leaving was the mistake to them. I didn't respond. I took the keys and went back to the group. Within 10 minutes, we were packed and gone. No one tried to stop us, but as we drove away, I looked back and saw them. About a dozen people standing on the deck in a straight line, watching us silently. More faces behind the windows. No movement, no waving, just watching. Later, Lena tried contacting the girl who had supposedly organized the trip. Nothing, no response anywhere. When we got back to school, she finally found her, and that's when everything fell apart. The girl's phone had been stolen 2 weeks before the trip. Every message Lena received had come from someone else, a stranger. We talked about going to the police, but there was nothing to report. No crime, no proof, just a house full of people who didn't know each other, pretending they did, and something about that place that felt wrong in a way I still can't explain. And the worst part is, I don't think we were supposed to leave.